Welcome to Making Democracy Work, a monthly program on topics of community interest brought to you by the League of Women Voters. Today we're going to talk about the effect that plastic has on the greenhouse gases that we know are bringing us climate change. And I have with me my co-host, Kaui Lucas, and I'll let Kaui introduce our guest.
I think we should let Sarah-Jeanne Royer say her name properly because Dr. Sarah-Jeanne Royer has a beautiful name, and we're just doing our best, but sorry about the accent.
No, that's perfect, that's perfect. So yeah, you got it right. I'm Sarah-Jeanne Royer. I'm currently doing a postdoctorate at the International Pacific Research Center at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and I'm working on marine debris and plastic pollution.
So Sarah's been here for 3 years, and you've done a lot while you were here. Can you talk about the work that you did that brought you here to the studio, basically? You are in the midst of it. What have you done?
So after I completed my PhD in Barcelona, I moved to Hawaii at Seymour at the University of Hawaii, and I started working with David Carr, the director of Seymour, and I joined a team. So I joined the team of Sarah Ferron and Samuel Wilson that were working on methane production in the ocean, and at that time they already started working on the topic I'm going to present today, so the greenhouse gases that are being emitted from plastic.
So the research was on methane being coming out of the ocean?
Yeah, exactly. So Sarah Ferron and Samuel Wilson, they were measuring methane production in seawater. And the numbers they got in terms of methane production rate were higher than what they were expecting. So then they went back to their experimental protocol, and they realized that the bottles in which they were making their incubation was made out of plastic. They were all made out of HDPE, high-density polyethylene, and this plastic, when it was exposed to solar radiation, was producing methane, ethylene, and other gases.
So the bottles themselves, where the samples were being taken, was the one producing the methane.
Exactly.
So as we look here, the ones that are the bad actors here, Sarah, Jean, which numbers?
Oh yes, so we tried 7 types of different plastic, and I guess they are pretty much all on the screen here. But after we tested the 7 most commonly used plastic in the world, we realized that LDPE, so low density polyethylene, which is number 4, was the plastic producing most methane and ethylene.
Okay. So, but there are other greenhouse gases that are also, besides methane, being emitted by the plastics.
Yeah, exactly. So there's also ethylene, and ethylene is a big player because, for example, low-density polyethylene. So polyethylene is made out of chains of CH2. So ethylene comes out of it at much higher rate than methane. So ethylene is an important one, and maybe would matter more in terms of greenhouse gases than methane in the end, and also ethane and propylene.
Okay, so 4 different ones. All right.
4 different ones that we measured and presented in the paper. We measured more, but we didn't include them in the scientific publication.
So I read some of the paper, and it was very interesting how you went about measuring that with, can you talk about that, the differences between the air and the water and the containers and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first we did this experiment where we used the 7 most commonly plastic used in the world. So we used them. Then we selected LDPE, the number 4, because it was the one producing most greenhouse gases. So then with LDPE, we did several tests. Amongst the tests, we tried different density, and then we also tried different surface area. So we tried the pellets, we tried the flakes, and the powder. So this was an experiment we did, and we saw that there was a lot more that was being produced with the powder compared to the pellets.
So pellets of plastic, flakes of plastic, which are thin but have a lot of surface area.
Exactly. and
More
powder.
than the pellets.
Yeah, and then the powder.
And then the powder.
Yeah, so eventually, I mean, plastic is degrading, it's becoming smaller and smaller. So we tried the pellets and the extreme, which is the powder, or even we could try even smaller pieces. But we saw then the comparison between pellets and powder, we get 488 times more methane than with the pellets.
488 times more methane from the powder.
Yeah, compared to the pellets.
So the same amount of plastic.
Yeah, yeah.
And just the form it's in creates that big a difference.
Exactly.
We have a little graphic about methane. Maybe we can see that and see why we keep talking about the methane.
Yeah.
Because it makes up 20% of all greenhouse gases, and it's 21 times more potent than the carbon dioxide.
Exactly. So that's why we spend so much time and energy on measuring methane, because ultimately it could make more difference than CO2, even if the concentrations are lower.
What tipped you off that the surface area might be?
Yeah, it's a big player, the surface area, and I'm trying to understand the process. So as plastic degrades in the ocean, a bottle of plastic at the beginning of its lifetime will be with, let's say, 10 of surface area, and then as it degrades, it becomes smaller, and the plastic is degrading, and it creates some small pieces, and then the surface area increases. So we could compare a bottle at the beginning of its lifetime and 50 years later when it's all in powder, and it will produce a lot more greenhouse gases, just because there's more of it that is actually available to react with the sunlight. So the photodegradation reaction can occur on more spaces.
And then another aspect of this is that life, the microscopic life in the ocean, eats these bits of plastic, right?
Exactly. So as plastic degrades, the pieces are becoming smaller and smaller, and they are more and more available to smaller species in the food web.
And then the bigger organisms eat that, and we eat those bigger organisms.
Yeah.
So we're eating the plastic too.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, and also the plastic in the ocean, it attracts other pollutants. So it's a mixture of chemical compounds. So when
Talk about that a little more.
Yeah, so when the fish will eat the small pieces of plastic, they don't only eat the plastic in itself, but they have these little molecules that are being attracted to it because of its lipophilic structure, and then it becomes like an accumulation of toxins. So it just attracts all of the molecules that are floating in the ocean. So in the end, the fish is not only eating the plastic, but also all the pollutants that are being attracted to the pieces of plastic.
So if I understand this right, Dr. Royer, if you have a molecule of the plastic, whatever it is, it is attracting other molecules of other, you said toxins, but I'm thinking, okay, well, it's not something living. It's some other chemical that just happens to be in the ocean.
Exactly. So it can be oil, it can be any other toxins that are coming from factories, or any pollutants that will fall eventually by gravity into the ocean.
And somehow there's something about the plastic that attracts these other molecules. Do we know what that is?
It's just the nature of it. So the nature of it will be attracting the other. So it's like oil and water. If you mix them, you'll have two layers. So any other types of oil will stay in the oil phase, and then the water, you'll have other molecules that are actually soluble in water.
Okay, so we have this toxic soup out there, sounds like.
Unfortunately so, and now we have to deal with it.
So you, speaking of dealing with it, you've been able to go and collect some of the most beautiful marine debris there is.
Yeah, we do.
Can you talk about that, how you've gone out and what that's been like, the marine debris here in Hawaii?
Yeah.
I think we have some pictures of you out in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually a beach cleanup with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, which is the biggest beach cleanup organization in Hawaii. And we host many beach cleanup, and this was a picture of James Campbell National Wildlife Refuge, where we find a mixture of different plastic types. So we find on this picture some pieces of microplastic. We also see a green cap, which belongs to a plastic bottles, and actually this plastic cap is made out of polypropylene, which is another plastic emitting greenhouse gases. And the reason why we find a lot of bottle caps at the beach is because polypropylene the density of it is lower than seawater, so it floats and then it travels at the surface of the ocean, and eventually it will end up on all our beautiful beaches, contrary to the bottle in itself. So the bottle is known to be PET, and the density of the plastic bottle is higher than seawater, so it sinks in the ocean. So that's why we find so many of these caps and so little bottles. It's just because the bottles will sink. Yeah. So that's an example of the difference in the structure and the density of plastic. And this is a picture from Camilo Point. So this is on the southeast of Big Island. This is one of the most polluted beaches we find here in Hawaii, unfortunately so. And you can see that there's a lot of fishing nets.
Say the name of the point again.
Camilo Point.
Camilo Point.
Yes.
Yeah.
South Hawai'i Island.
Yeah, yeah. It's very, very polluted there. And this is a picture of a net. That net was found in the middle of the water, about 8 nautical miles south of Coco Head. And the reason why we were chasing this net, it was to put a GPS tracker on the net. So you can see this little yellow box. Inside that box, it's a waterproof box, there's a tracker in it. And the reason why we try to track marine debris, it's to understand better the oceanic currents. So with Nikolai Maximenko and Jan Hafner at the International Pacific Research Center, we work on the modelization of the oceanic currents and how the debris will move. And we did a lot of work with the tsunami, but this was an example of marine debris that we tagged. And this is me.
And what is that instrument you've got?
Yeah, the instrument is an FTIR. It's actually to be able to identify the type of plastic that we find at the beach. So it's a very portable instrument from Agilent. They nicely donated it so we can use it when we do beach cleanups with the community. We can take plastic from the beach and instantly we can look at it and the nature of it, if it's LDPE, polypropylene, PET. And this is the group of friends that came along for a beach cleanup with the expedition. So all the ladies that traveled from here to Vancouver to go through the garbage patch. We organized a beach cleanup with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, and we just collected for 3 hours all the marine debris that we could see at James Campbell.
So when you were doing the tracker on the floating nets, what did you find?
So we are trying to understand more like the small scale, the movement around the islands, which is difficult because sometimes we find a lot of debris, for example, at James Campbell. And we know more or less why. It's because the North Pacific garbage patch is located in an angle where when the winds are high, it's spitting out all the plastic and it ends up on all the northeastern beaches of Hawaii Islands. So this we understand. But then at the beginning of the year of 2018, we started finding a lot of fishing nets at Diamond Head, Black Point, Waikiki, and we were like, this is new. We don't understand.
South Shore.
Yes, South Shore. So we don't understand why so many nets are ending up here. And this is the reason why with Nikolai Maximenko we started getting some GPS devices, and we just want to understand better the currents and how they end up here.
And do we know yet or not yet?
We don't have enough data as yet. So we used 7 GPS tracker all over the island to understand better, and we don't have enough data to create a model, so we are just accumulating, and it's not easy. We go at sea on a boat, we have our tracker, and we look with binoculars to try finding nets or any other debris, and we don't see very well when we are at sea and it's a little rough, so it needs a couple of hours before we find something. So we are still working on it. We are also working with a team from Ocean Voyage with Mary Crowley. So we are working in collaboration with her, where we are using big buoys that can last for 1 year at sea. And the expedition, for example, tagged the buoy on a big net. So now we can follow this net for a total of 1 year if everything goes well.
So these are discarded nets, marine debris,
Yes.
and you attach a buoy to them. Don't they become sort of fish aggregation devices de facto,
Yeah,
sort of?
yeah, exactly. So this is common practices with fishermen. They will take nets, old nets. They will entangle them between each others, and then they will go in the open ocean and dump them at sea, and then it will create like this coral reef in the open ocean, which will never occur. So that's why they are creating this artificial coral reef, and then it will start attracting bacteria, algae, smaller fish, bigger fish, and once it collected a huge amount of fish, then you have a device on it that sends a signal down to look at the biomass, and that emits a signal as a GPS. So whenever the biomass is really high, so a lot of fish around that net, it pings the boat, and then the boat comes and will fish everything around it. Then they leave it there, and then some of the nets, they just follow the oceanic currents, and they end up here on our beaches.
So the FADs, as they're called, they're actually winding up as marine debris.
Yes. And yeah, they are very dangerous for entanglement of wildlife.
Can you tell which ones are consciously developed to be a fish aggregation device, and which ones are sort of nature's accidental ones?
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
I guess so. I'm trying to still understand the process, but when you see a net that has like 100 of colors, you're like, how did this happen? What were the odds of a purple net meeting a green one and a blue one and a yellow one, and then entangled very well? So when I see these nets all well mixed together, I have the feeling that it's been arranged at the port itself. The fishermen like entangled the nets together to create this big ball, and then just dumped it in the ocean, contrary to a green net that we will find that might just have been discarded because it was not useful anymore, so just dumped in the ocean or just left there by mistake.
So one of the other things I was reading in your paper about was the difference between where the plastic is and how much greenhouse gas it emits.
Yes. So as oceanographers, I guess we started running the experiment in filtered seawater and then milky water, but at some point we tried...
I'm sorry, filtered seawater and then what kind?
Pure water. So
okay.
some water just to mimic the condition of plastic in the ocean. But then we were like, maybe we should look at it in air. So Sarah Ferron and Samuel Wilson, they made the experiment where they used the plastic, the same plastic, but instead of having it submerged in water, it was only in air. And we measured 2.3 times more methane coming out of the same amount of plastic, and 76 times more ethylene, which is also a greenhouse gas, so what's being emitted from air. So this brings us to, we are not only looking at plastic pollution in the ocean, but any type of plastic we actually have in our backyard, or even on the Asian beaches where they have a lot of issues with plastic waste management. I mean, the surface area you find in terms of plastic pollution there is very high. So any types of plastic used in greenhouses, so the cars, our cell phone, anything that is in our backyard made out of plastic will produce greenhouse gases.
Anything exposed to air, any
Yes.
plastic exposed to air
Yeah.
is giving off greenhouse gases at a higher rate than the plastics that are in the water. Did
Exactly.
I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then
What about sunshine? Does that have an effect? Does that
I mean, the strength of the sun will have an effect. So if it's more powerful, depending on the season. So, for example, if you take the same amount of plastic in Hawaii than in the Arctic, so the sun is not as powerful in the Arctic, so it will not emit as much as in Hawaii. So it depends on the latitude, and also it will produce during nighttime. So if the plastic is being exposed to UV, and in the bright sunshine, for example, and then it's nighttime, it will still produce greenhouse gases in the dark.
So all this plastic play equipment, plastic umbrellas, plastic awnings,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. At least for the 7 types we tried, which are the most commonly used, they will produce greenhouse gases at all times.
And that's why the Earth is warming faster than was predicted.
This we don't know as yet. I guess that's the next step, because all our experiment, we saw that, okay, the type of plastic will matter, and then the surface area will matter, and then if it's exposed to air or submerged in water will also matter. But we actually don't know how much plastic we find, especially in the terrestrial environment. Nobody has looked at the total amount of plastic exposed to air as yet, because we didn't have a reason, I guess, for it. So the next step will be to be able to quantify the global amount of plastic exposed to sunlight on a regular basis, and the type, and also the surface area. And from there, we'll be able to estimate better the total contribution of plastic to the methane and ethylene cycle.
So I've had about a week to process this information.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of information.
And it's still shocking me, and I go around telling it to other people. But you've known this for how long? How long has it been since you made this?
I guess I joined the lab of David Carl in 2015, August, so it's been 3 years. And we worked on the experiment for 1.5 years, and then it took a little while to publish the paper, so.
And we have you here in Hawaii for how long?
I will be here for another couple of months. I'm traveling a little bit between the University of Hawaii and Scripps at the moment, so until December I'll be around for sure.
Well, we have a video from Scripps and what they're doing. So let's have a look at that.
Okay.
And find out a little bit what your next home is going to be like, and the way they think about plastics there.
Perfect.
As a result of our studying the ocean and its relationship to land and atmosphere, we've come to understand that humans have an enormous footprint and have very profoundly affected the Earth, the planet. What having a small footprint means to us at Scripps is reducing our consumption and our impact in many ways. And one that we're very aware of because of the oceans is plastics. So one of the things that we're very focused on is doing whatever we can do to eliminate the use of single-use plastics. Zero waste is an important concept for us because we're right on the Pacific coast. And we want to ensure that we're not contributing to the waste, any kind of waste, that's going to the beach or going to the ocean. I think there's an important responsibility that comes along with being a global leader in Earth, space, geoscience, the ocean, all of the things that Scripps does. As a result, we need to convey that to people. We need to have people understand that. We need to teach that, but we also have a responsibility to walk the talk and to have the smallest footprint that we can have on our planet.
So thanks to Hillary Eggers for letting us use her video. And it's not a complete downer, at least.
Yeah.
And in the last few minutes, Sarah-Jeanne, can you Can you talk about microfibers a little bit?
Yeah, so microfibers is going to be my next project. I will start at Scripps Institute of Oceanography in January, and I will be working on the degradation of the fibers in the ocean and also under experimental different scenarios. So with Dimitri Deyen, so I'm looking forward to it. Microfibers are the new microplastic, I would say. It's pretty much the fibers that are being detached from all synthetic clothes during washing, for example. So there's about 200,000 to 700,000 microfibers that are being washed away in our waterways after a wash. So that's a lot of fibers, and eventually they end up in the ocean, and they are so small, the fish will eat them, and we are looking at the flesh of the fish at the moment to see if they have some microfibers, so if we eat microfibers pretty much. And we have other projects also with Greenpeace and also with different boats that are in the Arctic, the Amundsen. So they are sampling for us to look at the quantity of microfibers we find in different coastal regions of the world.
Now, we have a fabric called microfiber, but we also have artificial fibers like, nylon, polyester. Do those, when you wash them, do microfibers come from, say, polyester?
Absolutely. So they are the one we are looking at. Of course, the natural fiber from cotton, they might not be that great, but they are natural, so we expect them to degrade much faster than any synthetic microfibers.
So any artificial fabric will, when you wash it, release microfiber.
Yeah.
And that is too small to be taken out by our sewage system, so ends up in the ocean.
Exactly. So I think 30 years ago we used to have a filter, but in the washing machine, like we have in the drying machine, we can see all the microfibers after we dried our clothes. So in the washing machine, I guess it will get clogged a lot, so they removed it, the industry. So now it just goes straight into the ocean. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, we're almost out of time now,
Oh.
and I want to thank you so much, Sarah-Jeanne.
Thank you.
I don't even want to try to pronounce your last name.
Royer.
Yes. And we're sorry to be able to lose you to Scripps, but thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
thank you for this work. It's so important.
Thank you for
Yes.
sharing it with all your listeners.
And coming here on your birthday. Yay!
It's a pleasure.
Yes. So I am Pearl Johnson, and this is Kaui Lucas of the League of Women Voters. Thank you for watching.